By sunrise, the whole manor had decided Evelyn was worthless, but no one knew God had already sent proof of her name. The cobblestones were cold and wet beneath her thin shoes. Rain dripped from the eaves of the great house onto her shoulders. She stood at the servants' gate with a single cloth bag clutched to her chest. Inside it lay a worn Bible, a cracked hand mirror, and the wool shawl her mother had knitted before the fever took her. "Take her out. Now." Lady Catherine's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. The mistress of the manor stood on the stone steps, her velvet dressing gown wrapped tight against the chill. Her eyes were flat and cold. She did not look at Evelyn. She looked through her. 17 years of service, Evelyn whispered. 17 years of silence. Lady Catherine laughed. Silence is the only virtue a servant possesses. And you have proven you possess even less than that. The footman grabbed Evelyn by the arm. His grip was rough. He pulled her through the gate and onto the street. The iron latch clicked shut behind her. She heard the bolt slide home. She stood alone on the wet cobblestones. The rain soaked through her dress. The sky was gray and heavy. The manor windows stared down at her like empty eyes. She pressed her palm flat against the gate. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Only a prayer. Only a name. She whispered it once. Evelyn had come to Ashworth Manor at the age of 12. Her mother had worked in the laundry until her hands could no longer grip the wet cloth. When the fever took her, the housekeeper took Evelyn in. She was small for her age. Quiet. The other servants called her the little shadow. But shadows see everything. She learned to read by candlelight in the attic. She taught herself the Bible by tracing each word with her finger. By 14, she could recite the Psalms from memory. By 16, she could write in a hand as fine as any lady's. She never told anyone. She kept her learning hidden like a secret treasure. She served without complaint. She polished the silver until her fingers bled. She carried coal up 3 flights of stairs. She stood in the cold hallway for hours holding a tray while the family dined. She never asked for thanks. She never expected kindness. But she remembered kindness. She remembered the way the old Earl had once looked at her mother and said, "This woman works harder than any man in my employ." He had meant it as a compliment. Her mother had cried for 3 days. That was the only kindness Evelyn had ever seen from the Ashworth family. She carried it in her heart like a single candle in a dark room. When Lady Catherine inherited the manor, the candle flickered. When Lady Catherine dismissed her, the flame went out. Or so the world believed. Evelyn walked for 3 hours through the rain. She had no destination. She had no coin. The village was 2 miles behind her. The road stretched forward into nothing but gray mist and wet fields. She stopped beneath a dying oak. Its branches offered no shelter. The rain fell through them like tears. She sat down on the exposed roots and opened her bag. The Bible was dry. The shawl was damp. The hand mirror was cracked but whole. And at the bottom of the bag, wrapped in a piece of linen she had not placed there, was something she had never seen before. She pulled it out slowly. Her fingers trembled. It was a small leather-bound book. No larger than her palm. The cover was worn smooth and dark with age. There was no title on the spine. No name on the front. She opened it. The pages were filled with handwriting. Not her own. Not her mother's. A man's hand. Firm and deliberate. The ink had faded to a pale brown, but the words were still clear. She read the first line aloud. Her voice was barely a whisper. To the child who will never know my name. Her hand flew to her mouth. The book slipped from her fingers and landed in the mud. She picked it up quickly. She wiped the cover clean with her sleeve. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She did not know who had written it. She did not know how it had come to be in her bag. She did not know why it had been hidden from her for 19 years. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her story was not over. The rain did not stop. It fell in sheets across the open road. Evelyn's dress clung to her skin. Her teeth chattered. She could no longer feel her fingers. She found the church by accident. It sat at the edge of a small village she had never visited. The door was unlocked. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The air was still and warm. Candles flickered at the altar. The wooden pews gleamed in the soft light. She stood in the aisle, dripping water onto the stone floor, and for the first time in hours, she breathed. An old woman appeared from the vestry. Her back was bent. Her hands were gnarled with age. She looked at Evelyn and did not ask a single question. She simply said, "Come. There is a fire in the kitchen." Evelyn followed her. The kitchen was small and warm. A kettle hung over the hearth. The old woman poured tea into a chipped cup and placed it in Evelyn's hands. "You look like someone who has been cast out," the old woman said. Evelyn nodded. She could not speak. The old woman sat down across from her. She studied Evelyn's face for a long moment. Then she reached into her apron pocket and pulled out a small piece of bread wrapped in cloth. "Eat," she said. "And then tell me what you found in that bag." Evelyn froze. She had not mentioned the leather book. She had not told a single soul. The old woman smiled. Her eyes were kind. "I have been waiting for you," she said. "I did not know your face. But I knew you would come." Word traveled fast through the county. By noon, everyone knew. The servant girl had been cast out. Lady Catherine had made certain of it. She sent her footman to every house in the district. She sent her carriage to the market square. She stood in the window of the great hall and watched the news spread like fire through dry grass. She stole from the manor, Lady Catherine declared to anyone who would listen. Silver. Linens. My mother's jewelry. It was not true. Everyone knew it was not true. But no one dared say so. By evening, Evelyn had become a spectacle. She walked through the village to buy a loaf of bread, and the baker turned his back. She approached the well for water, and the women pulled their children close. She stood at the door of the inn, and the innkeeper locked it before she could knock. She was invisible in plain sight. She was nothing. Then Lady Catherine's carriage rolled into the village square. The horses snorted steam into the cold air. The footman opened the door. Lady Catherine stepped down in her finest gown. She walked straight to Evelyn. The crowd parted like water before a stone. "So," Lady Catherine said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "the thief has come to beg." Evelyn said nothing. She held the leather book against her chest. Lady Catherine laughed. "What do you have there? Another stolen treasure?" She reached out and snatched the book from Evelyn's hands. The crowd gasped. Evelyn's face went white. Lady Catherine opened it. She scanned the first page. Her expression flickered. Just for a moment. Just long enough for Evelyn to see it. But one person in that crowd had gone completely still. And what they saw in Evelyn's face had just shattered 19 years of silence. Evelyn found herself alone again. The crowd had dispersed. Lady Catherine had returned to her carriage, the leather book clutched in her gloved hand. She had not given it back. She had not even looked at Evelyn when she climbed into the carriage and drove away. The village square was empty. The lamps had been lit. The windows of the houses glowed warm and golden. Evelyn stood in the center of the cobblestones, and no one saw her. She walked to the edge of the village. She found a narrow alley between two stone walls. She sat down on the wet ground. She pulled her knees to her chest. She pressed her forehead against them. And she prayed. "Father," she whispered, "I have nothing left." The wind moved through the alley. It carried the smell of wood smoke and rain. "I gave them everything. I gave them my youth. I gave them my strength. I gave them my silence." She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. She had no tears left. "They took my mother. They took my home. They took the only thing I ever had that was mine." Her voice broke. "And now they have taken the only words I have ever received from my father." She waited. The silence pressed against her. "I do not understand," she said. "I do not understand why you gave me that book only to let her take it. I do not understand why you called me here only to abandon me." Her hands trembled. She pressed them flat against the stone. "But I will not stop trusting you. I will not stop believing that you see me. Even if no one else does. Even if I never see that book again." She closed her eyes. "Please. Send someone. Send anyone. I cannot do this alone." The wind stopped. The alley fell completely still. And in that stillness, she heard footsteps. The footsteps stopped at the entrance of the alley. Evelyn looked up. A man stood silhouetted against the gaslight. He was tall. His coat was dark and finely cut. He carried a leather satchel across his chest. He did not speak at first. He simply looked at her. His eyes were kind but searching. "Are you the woman they cast out of Ashworth Manor?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. She could not find her voice. The man stepped closer. He knelt down in front of her. He set his satchel on the ground and opened it. "I have been looking for you," he said. "My name is Mr. Alistair Finch. I am a solicitor from the County Records Office." He pulled out a folded document. The paper was thick and cream-colored. It bore a red wax seal the size of a coin. "I received this letter 7 days ago," he said. "It was sent by a man who died 19 years ago. He instructed me to deliver its contents to a young woman who would be cast out of Ashworth Manor on the morning of the first spring rain." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew this would happen." Mr. Finch unfolded the document. His hands were steady. His voice was calm. "The man who wrote this letter was your father. And he was not a servant, Evelyn. He was the rightful heir to the Ashworth estate." She stared at him. The words did not make sense. "Your father was the elder brother of Lord Ashworth," Mr. Finch continued. "He was disinherited when he married your mother, a woman of no title. He was erased from the family records. But before he died, he wrote down everything. His name. His lineage. His claim." Mr. Finch reached into his satchel again. He pulled out the small leather book. Evelyn's book. Lady Catherine had not destroyed it. She had thrown it away. But the medallion was only the beginning. What Mr. Finch now drew from his coat pocket would change not only her life, but the fate of every person in that room. Mr. Finch drew out a second document. This one was older. The paper was yellowed and brittle. But the seal upon it was unmistakable. It was the Ashworth coat of arms. And beneath it, a signature that had not been seen in 19 years. "This is your father's marriage certificate," Mr. Finch said. "And this is the record of your birth. Your name is not Evelyn the servant. Your name is Evelyn Ashworth. You are the only living heir to this estate." The words hung in the air like a bell that had not stopped ringing. Evelyn took the document. Her hands shook. She read her father's name. She read her mother's name. She read her own name written in ink that had dried long before she could walk. She was not a servant. She had never been a servant. She was the daughter of the house. The next morning, Mr. Finch stood before the magistrate. Lady Catherine was summoned. The entire village gathered in the great hall of Ashworth Manor. The same hall where Evelyn had polished the silver. The same hall where she had been called a thief. Lady Catherine entered in her finest gown. She looked at Evelyn and smiled. "You have no standing here," she said. "You are nothing." Mr. Finch unfolded the documents. He read them aloud. Every word. Every seal. Every signature. The room went silent. Lady Catherine's face drained of color. Her hands gripped the back of a chair. She did not sit down. She could not. The magistrate looked at Evelyn. He looked at the documents. He looked at Lady Catherine. "The estate is not yours," he said. "It never was." Lady Catherine opened her mouth. No sound came out. And Evelyn stood in the center of the hall. She wore a simple dress. Her hair was still wet from the rain. She held the leather book against her heart. She did not gloat. She did not raise her voice. She simply said, "I forgive you." The silence that followed was deeper than any silence she had ever endured. Psalm 37 verse 23 says, "The steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way." God had ordered her steps. Every single one. Even the ones that led her to the street. Even the ones that led her to the alley. Even the ones that led her here. She was not cast out. She was being brought home. And if you have ever been silenced, if you have ever been cast out, if you have ever been told you are nothing, comment below. Tell us your story. Because the God who saw Evelyn sees you too. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to know that God never forgets his own. He is writing your name even now. And he is bringing you home.